The final piece came when Derek bragged about legal backing. He named Richard Steele as their go-to attorney, claiming Steele had crafted expedited resolution protocols that could flip HOA violations into forced sales far faster than normal foreclosure timelines. Derek's confidence cracked when Elena, still playing the worn-down spouse, casually mentioned her own research. According to the original Pinewood Heights covenants, most cited violations required 30 days notice and independent arbitration before any fines could be issued. Color drained from Derek's face. He fumbled for an excuse, muttering about updated procedures, before hurriedly packing up. Elena's parting shot was deliberate. "Mr. Mansfield, thank you for explaining your streamlined acquisition methods and priority target strategies." The way she put on those phrases stopped him mid-step. For the first time, he looked afraid. When he was gone, Elena's expression shifted to that calculating smile I'd seen before. Yeah, the one that meant she'd just won a major round. "Jake, that man admitted to federal crimes on multiple surveillance devices," she said. "Vivian doesn't know that yet." She's about to get desperate. She was right. The next morning, Vivian's retaliation hit like a hammer. A loudspeaker blared from her front yard, her voice amplified across the neighborhood. "Attention Pinewood Heights residents, this is your daily security briefing." A broken bar. She'd installed a PA system and was delivering morning security updates as if she commanded a military base. Elena, sipping her coffee, murmured, "Psychological operations. Classic intimidation designed to isolate targets and turn the community against them." The broadcast droned on about unauthorized surveillance and individuals with questionable military ties. The hypocrisy was absurd, but some neighbors peered nervously through their curtains. The propaganda was working at least on a few. The escalation hit a new level when I stepped outside one morning to find my driveway buried under hundreds of glaring yellow flyers. Across the top, in huge red letters, it screamed, "Protect our children from surveillance." Beneath was what could only be described as a rambling, paranoid rant about military personnel running unauthorized intelligence operations in quiet neighborhoods. The centerpiece was a series of badly photoshopped images of our cabin, complete with ominous arrows pointing toward Elena's office window, along with a phone number where concerned citizens could report suspicious behavior. Worse still, these flyers weren't just on my property, they were taped to every mailbox, slapped onto car windshields, and pinned to lampposts throughout Pinewood Heights. Elena's counterstrike was fast and calculated. While Vivian was busy cosplaying as the neighborhood security chief, Elena was feeding information to her media contacts. By that afternoon, the Sacramento Bee ran a front-page article, "HOA officials under investigation for real estate fraud." It cited federal sources, detailed suspicious property acquisition schemes in several California neighborhoods, and named Derek Mansfield's consulting business as being of special interest to investigators. Elena had released just enough to put Derek and Vivian on the defensive without revealing her full hand. But Vivian wasn't ready to retreat. That evening, she rolled out what she must have thought was her masterstroke, a Facebook group called Protect Pinewood Heights. By the time I discovered it, over 200 residents had already joined. The group claimed to be devoted to safeguarding the neighborhood from illegal surveillance and intimidation. Vivian had posted photo after photo of Elena leaving or entering our cabin, complete with timestamps and commentary. Subject observed conducting encrypted communications at 0800 hours, one post declared. Another read, unusual equipment delivery documented at 1400 hours. That's when Tommy got his revenge for the confiscated phone. Using skills that impress Ida and mildly concern me, he created several fake accounts to infiltrate Vivian's online circle. He quickly found that she'd been altering her so-called evidence with photo editing software. The grass height violations, digitally exaggerated, parking infractions, taken at skewed angles and cropped to look incriminating. Tommy compiled everything into a clean, no-nonsense website, pinewoodtruth.com. It displayed side-by-side comparisons of Vivian's manipulated images and the originals, dismantling her narrative point by point. By the next morning, the tide began to shift. Mrs. Chena, who had never posted online in her life, left a public comment in Vivian's group. She wrote, I have lived in this community for 43 years and have never witnessed harassment like what's being directed at the Morrison family. Elena Morrison is a decorated military officer who has served this country honorably. The accusations against her are shameful. The backlash was immediate. Supporters tried to defend Vivian, but other residents began chiming in with their own grievances about the HOA's heavy-handed tactics. Ben Tucker followed with an account of late-night meetings he'd seen between Derek and strangers in luxury cars. He even described what looked like cash handoffs in the community center parking lot. Within hours, the Facebook group Vivian had built to smear us turned into a whistleblower forum. People compared notes on fines, home inspections, and pressure tactics that had been quietly escalating for months. One thread gained serious traction when Sarah Martinez posted photos of a professional surveyor hired by the HOA, questioning why residents' money was being spent on such costly services. Elena, watching the chaos unfold from her office, was practically glowing. She made the rookie mistake of giving the community a platform without controlling the story, she said. Now they're connecting dots she never wanted them to connect. Vivian's once threatening loudspeaker announcements were now the butt of online jokes, with residents sharing recordings of her daily briefings alongside memes about wannabe dictators. Then came her most desperate move, convincing a friendly reporter at the Pinewood Gazette to run a piece titled "Military Surveillance Concerns Rock Local Community." It was propaganda from start to finish, built on vague, unnamed sources, painting Elena as some rogue operative spying on civilians. The article avoided anything libelous, but the insinuations were clear. Unfortunately for Vivian, the blowback came fast. Larger outlets had already been tracking Elena's leads. The next morning, the San Francisco Chronicle published a detailed expose copyright on HOA corruption targeting military families. Federal law enforcement sources described organized campaigns designed to force home sales below market value, using Pinewood Heights as a prime example. Vivian's smear campaign had backfired. What she'd intended as a neighborhood coup had been transformed into a federal case study in HOA abuse. The finishing blow came when a local corruption blogger discovered Tommy's Pinewood truth site. The side-by-side images of Vivian's doctored photos went viral on Twitter under the hashtag #HoScams. The unraveling of Vivian's campaign accelerated online. The hashtag #HoFrad began trending, fueled by thousands of shares and comments from people recounting their own nightmarish HOA experiences. Her carefully spun tale about military surveillance was collapsing under the sheer weight of hard evidence proving her manipulation and deceit. By the time code enforcement officers arrived to dismantle her loudspeaker setup apparently in response to noise complaints, Elena was already shifting gears into what she called the final phase. Reviewing the screenshots Tommy had compiled, she noted with icy precision, "Vivian has no idea she's just built a perfect paper trail of harassment for federal investigators." But Elena also warned me that a cornered HOA president could be unpredictable. That warning proved prophetic. The next morning, the quiet suburb erupted into a scene straight out of a federal crime drama. Before I'd even finished my coffee, a convoy of black SUVs, police cruisers, and what looked like a tactical federal response team rolled into the driveway. Elena, who had been monitoring encrypted channels all morning, merely glanced at her watch and said, "Right on schedule." The lead agent, a calm, authoritative woman named Sarah Collins, introduced herself from the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. She made it clear they were investigating recent communications and monetary dealings in the community and believed Elena might have crucial information. Without hesitation, Elena replied, "I've been expecting you," and presented herself formally as Captain Elena Morrison, Military Intelligence, offering what she promised was comprehensive documentation. While Elena briefed the agents inside, Vivian was outside staging what she must have thought was her moment of vindication, a live Facebook broadcast from her front yard. With breathless urgency, she told viewers that federal agents were raiding our property, using it as proof of the very conspiracy she'd been promoting. The irony was almost too perfect. In her tunnel vision, she completely missed the fact that the FBI was also converging on Derek's house a few blocks away, where her partner in crime was being handcuffed. Elena emerged from the meeting carrying a thick folder and wearing a look I'd come to associate with victories she didn't need to brag about. Turning to me, "Tommy, and Mrs. Chia, who had stopped by expecting drama. She said the agents were ready to review certain community records in Vivian's possession. The emphasis on records made it obvious she wasn't talking about long measurements or citation notes. When Agent Collins approached, she did so with a disarming professionalism that somehow made the moment even more intimidating. "Mrs. Blackwood," she began, "we'd like to discuss your role in recent property acquisition activities." Vivian, still holding up her phone, declared for her viewers that she was documenting federal overreach. What she didn't grasp was that this very live stream was becoming part of a federal fraud case. The turning point came when Collins asked about a $15,000 wire transfer from Pinnacle Development to Vivian's personal account. Still addressing her phone more than the agent, Vivian insisted she had no idea what Collins meant and described Derek as a respected real estate professional. That bravado crumbled the instant the receipt was placed in her hands. Her voice wavered as she claimed it was merely a consulting fee for community development research. To anyone watching, it looked like a live, on-camera admission. Collins pressed on, outlining a list of allegations backed by Elena's meticulously gathered evidence, sharing confidential home member data with outside parties, accepting payment to sway enforcement actions, and orchestrating harassment to drive down property values. The precision of the accusations and the undeniable proof had turned Vivian's obsession with documentation into her downfall. The viral clip that would later circle the internet captured the exact moment she realized she was live streaming her own arrest. Collins explained that the Facebook posts, doctored images, and harassment efforts all amounted to federal conspiracy charges. As Vivian's phone kept broadcasting, her once confident tone dissolved into a weak, "I think I need to end this broadcast." Collins coolly informed her that the video itself was now federal evidence. The most gratifying moment came with Elena's final reveal. In a voice loud enough for the neighbors gathered on the sidewalks, she turned to me and said, "Jake, I think it's time everyone on the cabin has been a federal observation post for the last month. Every petty citation, every intimidation stunt, and every shady financial move has been logged as part of an ongoing investigation into a real estate scheme targeting military families." The words hit like a thunderclap. Mrs. Chen covered her mouth. Ben Tucker let out a sharp laugh. Vivian's face drained of color as the realization set in. She had been running her harassment campaign under constant federal watch. Moments later, Derek was driven away in handcuffs, and Vivian was read her charges for conspiracy and wire fraud. Once the FBI vehicles cleared the street, Elena handed me a thick manila envelope. "Inside is everything you need to see this place for what it really is," she said, eyes heavy with fatigue but still sharp with determination. "But first, a broken bar. We need to talk about my new Pentagon posting and why we'll be leaving the cabin sooner than planned." The weight of that envelope told me our neighborhood saga had just grown into something far larger. 3 weeks later, Pinewood Heights felt transformed. Morning announcements were replaced by the gentle clinking of Mrs. Chen's wind chimes and the sound of children playing without fear of sudden violations. Vivian's home sat empty with a foreclosure signal, an irony Derek might have appreciated if he weren't facing a long list of federal charges. Mrs. Chen's first act as the newly elected HOA president was to toss out every fine issued in the past 6 months and create a fund for residents financially damaged by the prior regime. Elena's own promotion to major came with orders to join the Pentagon's Financial Intelligence Unit. "Turns out," she said while boxing up her office, "Pinnacle Development was only one piece of a network stretching across a dozen states. What we uncovered here is going to keep hundreds of military families safe." I couldn't help but think about the strange twist of fate, how Vivian's vendetta ended up exposing a national security threat involving foreign money laundering through U.S. property. The neighborhood, freed from constant surveillance, started knitting itself back together. Ben Tucker hosted a barbecue to welcome Elena home, something that should have happened long before. Tommy's Pinewood Truth website even made its way into cybersecurity training courses as a textbook example of how civilians can counter disinformation. Mrs. Chen started a weekly coffee meetup where residents could air concerns without fear of retaliation. When I finally opened the manila envelope, the contents hit me in the chest. My grandfather's WI service records, proof of his Army intelligence work, and the Purple Heart we thought had been lost. Elena explained that the cabin had been more than a retreat. It was once a safe house for classified operations. The biggest surprise was hidden in the floorboards. While helping Elena pack, Tommy uncovered a metal box containing medals, a handwritten letter to future Morrisons, and a map showing several marked sites around Pinewood Heights. My grandfather's note warned, "If this land ever faces exploitation for purposes against American interests, you will know what to do." The map revealed a network of Cold War-era tunnels, one of which ran directly beneath the land Pinnacle tried to buy. Elena's eyes lit with recognition. "This isn't just about fraud," she said. "They were after something with strategic value." Within hours, federal teams returned, this time to secure the underground structures my grandfather had helped design decades ago. As we watched engineers document the hidden passages, Elena pointed to the map's label for our cabin, "Primary Observation Post." "Your grandfather wasn't just living here, Jake," she said. "He was stationed here, and now, 3 generations later, we've finished the mission he started." Not long after, Agent Collins confirmed that the Pentagon had officially declared the cabin a protected historic site. Vivian's attempt to drive us out hadn't just failed, it had ensured our family's connection to the place was permanent. Before leaving for Washington, Elena paused beside her packed car. "This posting is temporary. In 2 years, we should think about making the cabin our full-time home. Some traditions are worth keeping. I never did explore the last tunnel marked on the map. Maybe that's one mystery meant for the next Morrison to solve." If you've ever been steamrolled by a hostile HOA or a power-hungry official, know Thesa, you're not powerless. Patience, documentation, and strategy can turn the tables. At HOA Stories, we create narratives that entertain and arm you with real tactics for outsmarting the bullies in your life. If you believe in justice over intimidation, hit like and subscribe. From all of us here at Community Chaos, stay sharp, stay ready, and remember, some gates are worth keeping locked. My neighbor actually called the police just because my wife decided to work from our family's cabin. The HOA president stood in our driveway like a guard at a castle gate, gripping her clipboard as if it were a weapon, shouting about supposed commercial property violations before dialing 911. My wife, calm as ever in her sharp military uniform, didn't flinch. Instead, she reached slowly into her wallet and pulled out a single card. The moment the president's eyes landed on it, her whole demeanor changed. Her knees buckled, and she sank to the ground like the weight of the card had knocked every ounce of arrogance out of her. The street went completely still. If you think that's where things ended, you are wrong. What happened next was exactly what we'd been waiting for. It all began when my wife, Captain Elena Morrison, came home from her most recent overseas deployment. 8 months away had left her with a tiredness you don't just sleep off, of the kind that comes from long nights in dangerous places and making life or death calls for people you'll never meet. She told me she wanted to set up a small home office in my grandfather's old cabin in Pinewood Heights. It seemed perfect, quiet, peaceful, and far from the chaos of our main home in downtown Sacramento. That cabin has been in my family since 1943, when my grandfather, Staff Sergeant Robert Morrison, bought it with his first paycheck after returning from the Pacific. I still remember him teaching me to tend the garden, his rough, calloused hands guiding mine as we planted tomatoes. "A house isn't just property," he used to tell me. "It's where the soul of a family lives." After he passed away 5 years ago, I'd only used the place for occasional getaways. We had a basic security setup necessary after someone broke in when I was a kid and stole my grandfather's Purple Heart, but Elena upgraded it so she could monitor the cabin remotely whenever I traveled for work. Pinewood Heights is one of those neighborhoods where every mailbox matches, and the HOA rules read like a small novel. Most neighbors were decent. Mrs. Chen still brings us cookies at Christmas, and Ben Tucker always waves when I'm washing the car. But then there was Vivian Blackwood. For the past 4 years, she'd been the self-declared queen of the neighborhood and HOA president. She measured grass with a ruler, took pictures of trash cans left out too long, and carried her clipboard everywhere. Her friend and second-in-command, Derek Mansfield, ran some real estate consulting business and shadowed her on her little patrols. That morning, while I was helping Elena move her desk and computer into the cabin, I saw Vivian striding up the driveway, a clipboard in one hand, phone in the other, recording already. Derek trailed behind with a camera and a measuring tape. "Mr. Morrison," she announced in a voice that dripped with authority, "this is a clear violation of our residential covenants. You can't run a commercial business from a residential property." Elena stood in the doorway with a box of office supplies, still in uniform from her final base debriefing. I could tell from her stance that she was on alert to calm, but ready. I kept my tone polite. "Ma'am, my wife is just setting up a home office. She's transitioning out of active duty and needs a quiet spot for consulting work. This isn't a commercial business." Vivian actually snorted. "I've been monitoring this property," she said. "Vehicles coming and going, equipment being moved, and now military personnel setting up an operational facility. This is a neighborhood, not a business district." The way she said military personnel made my blood boil. She then lifted her phone higher. "This is being live-streamed to the Pinewood Heights Facebook group. Our community deserves to know when guidelines are being violated." Derek chimed in. "We've got standards here, Jake. Can't have people thinking they can just set up shop anywhere, while measuring the space between our cars like he was hunting for another infraction." Elena quietly set down her box and removed her gloves with deliberate precision. Without a word, she pulled out her wallet. Vivian's commentary on the livestream grew even more dramatic. "As you can see, viewers, this individual is reaching for something. This is exactly the type of intimidation." Elena drew a single card from her wallet and held it up. It was just her military ID, nothing flashy, but in the sunlight, the words U.S. military officer in her service ribbons shone like steel. She displayed it with the same calm authority you'd use at a security checkpoint. Vivian froze. Her eyes widened, the clipboard slipped from her hands, and she staggered backward until her knees hit the pavement. Derek stopped mid-measurement. Even Mrs. Chen came out onto her porch and whispered, "She's an officer." Elena stepped forward, her voice quiet but steady. "Ma'am, you've just made yourself the primary witness in a federal investigation." Those two words rippled through the small crowd like a stone hitting a still pond. Vivian's face drained of color so fast it was almost comical, and Derek's measuring tape slipped from his hands. Even the people watching her live stream were probably wondering what they had just witnessed. I had no idea what Elena meant by that, but the calm authority in her voice told me she was playing a much bigger game than I realized. Vivian's bullying act had just run into something she couldn't bluff her way through, and I recognized the look on my wife's face. It was the same calculating focus she had when she was 3 moves ahead in chess. Elena tucked her ID back into her wallet, picked up her box of office supplies, and gave a polite nod to the onlookers. "Gentlemen, ma'am, I'm sure you all have a pleasant day ahead." As she walked away, I heard Vivian whisper to Derek, "What did she mean by federal investigation?" But Derek looked just as rattled as she did. I thought that little moment of public embarrassment would be the end of it. I was wrong, very wrong. Within 2 days, our mailbox became the front line of what can only be described as paperwork warfare. The first violation claimed our grass was 2 talabai less than an Inca and came with a $200 fine. I actually laughed when I opened it, thinking it had to be a joke. By the next morning, it wasn't funny anymore. A ticket for our car being parked a couple of inches over the property line, $300. The day after that, a fine for leaving the trash bins visible after collection, $250. Every notice was written in stiff legal language, complete with timestamps, photos, and Vivian's dramatic signature as if she were prosecuting a federal case rather than running a neighborhood association. Elena found the whole thing mildly entertaining. On Friday morning, as I stared at yet another notice, this one accusing us of unauthorized tree branch intrusion into communal airspace and now charging $500, she smirked. "This is classic psychological warfare," she said. "Overwhelm your targets with petty rules until they crack." From her desk by the cabin window, she was buried in consulting work along encrypted calls, documents spread across every surface. The peaceful transition she'd planned was quickly being shredded by Vivian's vendetta. My 12-year-old son, Tommy, was glued to the drama. He'd started keeping a notebook, logging every time Vivian or Derek showed up with measuring tools. "They've been here 4 times this week," he told me, flipping through his notes. And always when mom's on important calls. That detail hit me hard. Elena had faced enough pressure over Cesar. She didn't need to come home to some power-obsessed neighbor with a clipboard. By that afternoon, Vivian was back at this time with a professional surveyor in tow. The man looked uneasy as she ordered him to measure every inch of our property: fence height, driveway width, house to property line distance. Derek hovered close by with a high-end camera, documenting everything like they were building a legal case. "This is insane," I muttered. But Elena's calm smile returned. "Jake, sometimes you let your opponent show exactly who they are before you respond." While they worked outside, I dug into my grandfather's old filing cabinet and pulled out the original property deed and HOA rules. It didn't take long to spot the problem. Vivian wasn't just nitpicking, she was ignoring her own association's bylaws. Grass height violations required a 30-day warning before fines. Parking tickets needed photos from 3 different angles. Tree trimming complaints had to be backed by a certified arborist's report. She was skipping every step of due process. Either she thought I wouldn't read the fine print, or she was betting I'd be too intimidated to fight back. Both were mistakes. Around late afternoon, Tommy burst into the room, whispering urgently, "Dad, you've got to see this." From his bedroom window overlooking the Blackwood property, he had been filming Vivian and Derek at her patio table. The audio was faint, but I caught Derek saying something about Phase 2 and Vivian replying with accelerated timeline. Then disaster struck. Tommy's phone slipped against the window with a loud clack. Both of them looked up instantly. Derek was already on his feet and heading for our property line before Tommy could duck away. "That kid's spying on us," Derek shouted. "They're recording private conversations." Moments later, Vivian was pounding on our front door, clipboard in hand. "That device contains illegally obtained recordings," she announced. "I'm confiscating it as evidence of harassment and stalking behavior." I had no choice but to hand over the phone. Tommy looked crushed. It was his first real attempt to help, and it had backfired. But even as disappointment settled in, I saw something shift in his expression, a flicker of determination. This wasn't going to break him, it was going to make him sharper. That evening, as we added up the mounting finesse a broken bar, by the time I tallied up the latest stack of violation letters, the total was an eye-watering $4,800. I called Mrs. Chen just to vent, but what she told me changed everything. "Oh, Jake," she said, her voice tight with worry, "I got $500 for a excessive holiday decoration display. My Christmas lights have been the same for 15 years. She hesitated, then lowered her voice. "And I know at least 8 other families who've been hit this week. Every single one of them either spoke up for you or refused to condemn your wife's so-called military facility." That was when the scope of Vivian's retaliation became clear. She wasn't just coming after USA, she was targeting anyone who didn't fall in line. It was intimidation 101, and it was working. Neighbors were keeping their distance. The annual Labor Day barbecue Mrs. Chen usually organized had been quietly postponed. But Vivian had miscalculated. She had no idea who she was up against. Elena had been watching the whole thing unfold, saying little, but the moment I told her what Mrs. Chen had said, I saw a change in her expression. It was the look she got when she was about to turn defense into offense. "Jake," she said, sliding into her desk chair and opening her laptop, "want to see how your wife really works?" I didn't know what she meant, but the certainty in her voice told me Vivian's paper war was about to collide with something far bigger. That morning, Elena finally let me in on what she'd been doing since Vivian's first clipboard visit. I found her in the cabin's small kitchen, surrounded by a stack of documents that clearly hadn't come from the HOA office. "Sit down," she said, in the same steady tone she used for military briefings. "What I'm about to tell you changes everything about the situation." She spread several papers across the table. I saw financial statements, property records, and photographs that were definitely not taken by bored neighbors peeking through blinds. "I'm not just Captain Elena Morrison on medical leave," she began, tapping a page with an unfamiliar government seal. "I'm military intelligence, assigned to a joint task force with the CIA. We're investigating large-scale real estate fraud tied to potential national security risks." The words hit me like a cold wave. My wife Ia, whom I thought was easing into civilian consulting, was running an active federal investigation from our family cabin. The reason I chose this place wasn't just for the quiet," she continued. "Pinewood Heights, along with several other neighborhoods across 3 states, has been flagged for suspicious property acquisitions that suggest money laundering through foreign investment fronts." From a manila folder, she pulled Derek Mansfield's personal financial records. "Your neighbor Derek isn't just some small-time real estate consultant. In the past year and a half, he's handled the purchase of 17 properties here, each bought far under market value, most under pressure from the HOA. Another folder revealed bank transfers and shell company connections. Every buyer traces back to Pinnacle Development Corporation, which has received over $40 million from sources we're still tracking. The pattern points to strategic property grabs, possibly for reasons that go beyond real estate." I was still processing when she smiled faintly. "The best part? Derek's alliance with Vivian means we've had a front row seat to their entire operation. While she's been busy harassing us, he's been careless about covering his tracks." She slid over photographs of Derek's trash. Inside had been crumpled bank statements, draft contracts, even a preliminary agreement between Pinnacle Development and a company called Pinewood Acquisition LLC. That agreement spelled it out: buy up the entire neighborhood through a mix of voluntary sales and forced foreclosures triggered by HOA violations. This wasn't just petty harassment, it was a coordinated plan to take over Pinewood Heights one property at a time. Right then, a knock at the door interrupted us. Mrs. Chen stood on the porch, wringing her hands. She glanced around nervously before stepping inside. "Jake," she whispered, "I got another notice. If I don't pay the $500 by Monday, they're starting foreclosure on my house." And it's not just me. The Hendersons, the Johnsons, the Martinez family, and several others got the same letter. Elena's professional demeanor took over instantly. "Mrs. Chen, how long have you lived here?" 43 years, Mrs. Chen replied, voice trembling. "My late husband and I bought our home when Tommy's grandfather was still a young man. We've never had a single problem with the HOA." Broken bar. Mrs. Chen explained she'd never had a single issue with the HOA in all her decades living in Pinewood Heights, at least not until Vivian took over as president 4 years earlier. That date matched perfectly with the start of the questionable property purchases Elena had been tracking. Lowering her voice, Mrs. Chen glanced toward the window as if someone might be listening. "Last month, I spotted Derek behind the community center with a man in a luxury car. They were exchanging envelopes. Derek told him they needed to speed things up because they're wary." Broken bar. Potential complications. Elena's eyes narrowed. Those words were identical to what Tommy had overheard during his botched recording attempt. The puzzle pieces were locking together faster than expected. The next visitor arrived less than half an hour later. Ben Tucker looked pale and jittery, like he'd been carrying a heavy secret. "I've got to say this before I lose my nerve," he blurted. "A few nights ago, I was walking my dog late when I saw Derek in the same parking lot Mrs. Chen mentioned. That same expensive car was there. This time, I was close enough to see him hand over a thick envelope and receive what looked like a briefcase stuffed with cash. When my headlights hit them, they both took off. I did manage to catch part of the other car's license plate." Before Ben had even finished, Elena was reaching for her secure phone. The testimonies from both neighbors, paired with the incriminating paperwork she'd recovered from Derek's trash, were now pointing to something far bigger than simple HOA bullying. "Ben," Elena asked firmly, "would you be willing to give an official statement?" When he nodded, I realized my wife was about to turn our friends and neighbors into federal witnesses. While Elena stepped outside to make an important call, I picked up the latest notice we'd received in the mail. It demanded $4,800 in fines and warned that failure to pay within 72 hours would allow the HOA to place a lien on our home and start foreclosure proceedings. Vivian and Derek had both signed it. For the first time, I fully understood that this wasn't petty harassment. This was part of a deliberate plan to push us out and sell our home to shadowy buyers. When Elena returned, she wore the kind of smile that made me both relieved and wary. "Ready to see how I work?" she asked. I still wasn't sure what she meant, but I knew Derek Mansfield and Vivian were about to run headfirst into her military intelligence expertise. By the next morning, She was already in action. "I'm going to give Derek exactly what he's been waiting for," she said, dialing his office. In a calm but wary tone, she introduced herself as Elena Morrison from Pinewood Heights and hinted that she and her husband were considering selling because of the HOA's relentless pressure. Her act was flawless, just the right blend of resignation and frustration to lure him in. Derek jumped at the bait. Within hours, he was standing at our door with a leather briefcase and an overeager smile. Elena had swapped her uniform for casual clothes and was playing the part of a stressed spouse to perfection. She welcomed him into the living room, where she'd staged what looked like an informal consultation setup. What Derek didn't know was that every word was being recorded using equipment far more sophisticated than Tommy's confiscated phone. "Mrs. Morrison, I understand completely," Derek began, spreading papers across the coffee table. "The HOA's been cracking down hard. Sometimes, properties just become more trouble than they're worth." He produced comparable sales data that showed suspiciously low prices. Then came the pitch: he worked with investment groups that could buy quickly, no inspections, no financing delays, and most importantly, no more HOA hassles. Elena leaned in, asking careful questions while Derek revealed more and more. He spoke about the area's potential for large-scale development resorts, corporate retreats, and noted that current homeowners wouldn't benefit from any post-development value increases. The real breakthrough came when he started talking about his method for handling HOA complications. Lowering his voice like it was a private joke, he admitted, "Vivian and I have a very efficient system for resolving issues. My buyers will often cover outstanding HOA debts in the purchase price. It's a win-win for sellers who just want out." He didn't realize he had essentially confessed to using the HOA as a weapon to drive down property values. Then came the smoking gun. Derek pulled up a spreadsheet on his tablet, proudly displaying data from 17 acquisitions complete with purchase prices, violation amounts, and a column labeled Acquisition Timeline Acceleration. Every entry listed the original homeowner's name alongside details of how fast the deal had been closed. The spreadsheet on Derek's tablet left no room for doubt. It listed 17 properties, each with the former owner's name, total HOA fines, and the final sale amount to Pinnacle Development. The pattern was crystal clear: the higher the fines, the lower the sale price, and every one of those lowball deals had earned Derek a hefty commission. While Elena was drawing out Derek's admissions with surgical precision, I was making my own discovery. At her suggestion, I combed through the HOA's access logs. What I uncovered chilled me to the core. Derek had been exploiting his position as vice president to pull sensitive resident data, credit reports, income records, even personal crises like divorces or medical debt. This wasn't real estate consulting, it was targeted exploitation. The most damning evidence was a file he'd neglected to erase from the shared HOA server titled Priority Acquisition Targets. Our address was there, alongside disturbing notes: military family, possible debt from deployments, inherited property with minimal mortgage equity, responds well to authoritative pressure. Mrs. Chen's name appeared too: elderly widow, fixed income, strong emotional attachment to property, may require prolonged pressure campaign. Every household in Pinewood Heights had been dissected like prey in a calculated hunt. Meanwhile, Tommy had quietly resurrected his own intelligence operation at this time without using confiscated gadgets. Borrowing a telescope from his friend Marcus 3 houses over, he began logging Vivian's movements. One day he pulled me to his bedroom window and whispered, "Dad, you need to see this." His chart showed that, every afternoon without fail, Vivian stepped into her backyard, made a phone call, and scribbled in the same notebook. The timing caught Elena's attention. It coincided exactly with her most critical work calls. Using her military network, she arranged for a telecom analysis. The results were explosive. Vivian's calls went to a number belonging to Pinnacle Development's parent company, always during Elena's video conferences, lasting just long enough for precise status updates. Vivian wasn't merely a spiteful Navarro, she was feeding intel to Derek's bosses,